Hello, Dr. Michaels and Com 430. I am Joshua Velez, and yes, I am traveling abroad and filming this video from a hotel room. That said, I wanted to provide you all with some context before I went ahead and shared my major takeaways from my interview with a former manager, a current friend, and current mentor, Laura Carroll. Most of us as Com 430 students are managing competing demands. From school to work, we also are managing a household and friends and balancing all of them really well most of the time, giving us a reason to be proud. My question for you, how far do you think the ego can take you in leadership? And another question, how does ego impact your leadership style? Today we'll be summarizing some of the most important questions that I was able to ask Laura Carroll, a former manager, friend, and mentor of mine. Those 7 questions will provide you with unique insight into how a leader can transform from one that is focused on ego and self, and to be frank, authority, to one that is more focused on others, selfless, and a democratic leader, and what it took to convert to get there. One of the first questions I asked Miss Laura Carroll was, why did you decide leadership? In her response, I didn't choose leadership. Leadership really chose me. At the time, Laura was with a company that promoted those that were really good at their current role to leadership, not because they were remarkable leaders, but because they had expert experience, right? Talking about expert power and the different powers that we have in our text, she had expert power at the time. This ultimately allowed her to become promoted. When I asked Laura what her original approach to leadership was, she shared the following. My original approach was as an individual contributor. My goal was to make the entire team the highest producing team, just as I had become the highest producing individual. And I quote, it was me making sure that we got the same production level for the entire company. It didn't really matter to me how we got it. And so I did. I became a little bit of a dictator type leader at the time. It's not something that I'm proud of. This question provided so much insight, and I had a couple of takeaways from this. Number one, ego was definitely involved when Laura decided that she would be setting up the goals for others. The next question I asked that also garnered a lot of really good takeaways was, what type of results did you originally receive when you followed the authoritarian type leadership approach? And she shared the following. I got the results I wanted. People were the best at what they did because I was standing over them, demanding it. We were one of the top producing teams in the office, if not in the company, but I can't tell you that they did it happily. It was more out of a fear mindset. So when we think about authoritarian leaders, one of the things that we find out right away is the following. Authoritarian leaders are able to increase productivity when they are present. And that's one of the things she highlights in her statement. I was able to get the highest results because I was standing over them. The next question really taught me a lot about her shift in leadership approach. When asked, what do you feel about your current leadership approach? How would you describe it? She says, I learned that leadership is all about building relationships. You can persuade anybody to do anything as long as they feel safe and cared for. Knowing who they are, what's important, and how they've been led in the past, these are important things to know. It's about relationships, finding out what's important to them, to help them be successful in the long term and help ultimately the organization in the long run by doing so. When I think about a democratic leader, I think about somebody that absolutely increases follower satisfaction by taking them into account, as our textbook states. A democratic leader also sets goals with their peer, with their follower, versus without their input. This was another major takeaway, the fact that the democratic trait could literally be defined in her leadership style. On a final note, on a final question, if you could provide one piece of advice to a new leader, what would it be? I asked Laura, and what her response was really shocked me, but is very important today. She said to actively listen and to ask questions to better understand. She mentioned the importance of understanding who your leaders are, what they wish to accomplish, what they wish to do. She mentioned that a lot of leaders today, for example, will listen so that they can respond versus listen so that they can understand. She mentioned if she could only provide one tip, that it would be, once again, to actively listen and to listen to understand. And so I go back to my question that I initially proposed. How far can an ego take you in leadership? And also, how does ego affect the leadership style? Well, what we learned today is when you lead with an ego, you can only make it to a certain level before ultimately that ego has to go away. Number one. Number two, we also learned that when you have an ego, you may be more prevalent to have a certain leadership style. For example, one that is more self-fulfilling versus selfless. And in this case, this is what the ultimate revelation was in the shift that Laura Carroll had from an authoritarian leader that was focused on just herself, just her goals, and making sure her team became the top producing team, to a democratic leader who cared now about her people, right? And getting what the people wanted to get done, and having their goals placed before herself and focusing on relationship. The bridge ultimately that got her there was her career experience, the years and the hardships that she had to go through to get there. And so with this, I close the interview and the video here by saying, take time to question yourself. My call to action to you would be, check your ego and consider where you might be leading in a certain type of way as a result of it. With that, I thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and you all have a great rest of your day.